Howdy folks, and welcome to a filmed version of our Bog Garden Highlights tour. Turned out that the cell signal in that particular part of the garden, which sits in the middle of the garden, is worse than anywhere else that I've tried to live stream from. So I'm filming it. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. One of the downsides of filming is I'm unable to flip back and forth between the different cameras on my phone. So I figured y'all would rather see what I'm looking at in the beautiful botanical garden. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And yeah, we're going to get going. And I'll introduce myself along the way. My name is Paige Engelbrektsson, and I am the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation. And during the pandemic, we have been doing a series of live streams, now including video, of how the garden has been changing. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, you can see right now the mountain laurel is just gorgeous. Feels like everywhere you look, it's blooming. So that is certainly one change. But our boardwalk has some less showy but equally beautiful flowers to offer right now. I am restraining myself from doing multiple takes of this, so if I make errors, y'all know why. This is actually a brand new bridge installed very recently here at the Boardwalk in honor of one of our botanical gardening committee members, Dr. Larry Mellichamp. And I've been picking people's brains about the bog, and very often then we'll reference what Larry has said. So thank you, Larry, for all of your wisdom that's been passed on to me by other people. So this is another view of Lindenwood Lake. You can really see over there the mountain laurels and how they just litter the sides of it. Lindenwood Lake is, we believe, fairly old. Our best guess at the moment is it's probably more than a century since it was first dammed. And in fact, you can see that's North Campus over there, and the dam is right there. That's where the spillway is. And there's a lot of water in this lake, which you would know if you'd been here last spring and saw it while it was drained for construction. And that water tells an important part of why we call this the Bog Boardwalk. You can start to see around the edges of the lake, we find a lot of green vegetation of all kinds. There's grasses and rushes and some woody shrubs, some small trees, some larger trees as well, like this pine. But if we look down at the ground, we will see there's a lot of green stuff that you won't find in very many other places. A lot of grasses as well. But this is what we call our bog boardwalk, because it is supported by the water from Lindenwood Lake. If we were to travel back in time before the lake was here and look around, what we would see is multiple streams all around the lake that would be moving through this area and continuing downhill. I like to say that all the water in these mountains is going somewhere. It very rarely sits and is stationary, except in the cases of beaver ponds or other unusual oddities. But those streams, as you can see, produce enough water that it would likely have kept the ground in this area that we're looking at now, beneath all of the shrubs, saturated. And that is the perfect condition for one of the key plants in a bog, sphagnum moss to be specific, which is about as specific as I can get because there are hundreds of species of sphagnum moss. But if you were here and you were able to touch it, you would be able to feel it's just mounded up on itself. And that is characteristic of bogs. Sphagnum loves that water, which it can be tricky to define a bog. It seems to depend on who you ask and where specifically you're talking about geographically. But the simplest definition that we can use here in the Southern Appalachians is it's an area generally flat or gently sloping where water moves slowly or not at all. And that allows very specific plants, particularly those that love acidic conditions, to flourish. So I'm going to come off trail here so I can show you guys. You can see the edge of Lindenwood Lake here. And that water runs essentially right to the ground beneath my feet. In fact, if I were to take a few more steps, you would hear it start squishing. And that's because the water is running up through all this sphagnum moss, which is going to build up and up and up on itself and create very acidic, nutrient-poor conditions. This is kind of an artificial bog in that it's created by a lake, which is man-made, and you can see hopefully some more of the water lilies and their pink blooms out there on the water. But it does a great job of showcasing the kinds of plants that you would find if you were to come across an undisturbed natural bog here in the Appalachians. And one of those plants, in fact, perhaps our most iconic bog plant, is growing all along the side of this boardwalk. And you can see, standing tall and upright stems, its flowers, which to me don't look like the flowers of any other plant that I've had the chance to see. I'm gonna sit down here on the edge of our boardwalk to give you guys a close-up. This is the flower. It's a very unusual color with these maroon petals with the green structures. And you can just see inside here the yellow grains of pollen where bees will buzz their way in after the scent of nectar. But pitcher plants have another source of nectar, and I've kind of given it away. This is a pitcher for which it gets its name. And there are many different species in North Carolina, but they all have these very unique modified leaves. So this is a leaf, which perhaps the green color gave it away, but it's not hollow. Well, it is hollow, but it's not empty inside. In fact, you can just see around the edges of the inside, there's the glint of water. So imagine this leaf grows, perhaps as this young one is doing now, and the top folds back and rain falls down into this leaf and fills it. That's not all. The plant adds a few extra goodies, digestive enzymes, and then it produces the scent of nectar from around the opening. And nectar smells good, so a lot of different insects are going to come, lured by the scent, and hopefully, in the plant's mind, land somewhere on what might look like glistening, shiny hairs to you. And that's what they are. These are very fine hairs that point downwards. So if an insect lands, the idea is that it's pushed downwards, hits a very thin waxy area, and then falls into that rainwater, where the plant conveniently has digestive juices. And in fact, you can see there's a small black dot in the middle here. That is an insect, which has done exactly what the pitcher plant is hoping it will do, which is fall in and pass away and then be digested. And I mentioned a few minutes ago that bogs are nutrient poor, which is the whole reason why pitcher plants have evolved to be what we call carnivorous or meat eating. They actually eat animals, but that's because it's the only way that they can get the kinds of nutrients they need to flourish and grow. You might have heard of Venus flytraps or sundews. These are other forms of carnivorous plants that also likewise live in bogs. Pitcher plants are actually found across the coast of North Carolina and here in the mountains. So two different populations living together, well, not together, that's the whole point, living separately. This is purple pitcher plant, Sarracenia purpura. And that gets its name. Occasionally the pitchers themselves will be a reddish color, but I also think it could refer to the flower colors as well. So just imagine they're sitting on sphagnum moss with water soaking up their roots. Very acidic, both because of the soil and what the sphagnum moss actually does, which is purposefully acidify the area. And they are, as you might imagine, happy as clams down here, as long as there are plenty of bugs that fall in and feed them. So they are pretty awesome. We have another plant here. It's not tied to bogs exactly, but I did want to point it out. This is called wild raisin. And the cool part about this is that the berries will start off green and turn iridescent pink before finally darkening in the way that the elderberries and blackberries we talked about previously on a live stream will do. So I just find them absolutely fascinating. But another plant that you'll often find in bogs is Joe pieweed, which has a hollow stem and can grow to be very tall. And then we have a number of shrubs in here where my best guess is some sort of willow. Constantly trying to educate myself and recognize more plants, but it is a constant learning process. One of the easiest ones to recognize, though, actually, is this plant right here. And if you think of something that we eat that the leaves remind you of, you may be thinking cabbage, which is how it gets part of its name. And what's funny about watching this plant grow is these leaves are enormous. I mean, just for comparison, here is my hand. They are basically umbrellas for small children. But the flower is how it gets the first part of its name. It's a very small structure. It's like a purple cone wrapped around an interior row of yellow flowers that smell very bad to attract flies as pollinators. And those are called, they smell like skunks because they smell that bad. So what we're seeing here is skunk cabbage, which is a great indicator of a boggy area. I think ours bloomed at the end of February. I have to go back in my photos and check. And now, I think we have some sparrows, perhaps a baby out of the nest, given that I see two adults. Sorry, they are perching in the trees right here, the hemlock and the locust. So I'm going to give them a moment to see if they move off. If the baby is comfortable with flying, whichever one the baby is. But this is kind of a deer trail to the edge of Lindenwood Lake. And I would not recommend going on this unless you have the right footwear. We don't maintain it as a trail. So you can see these kinds of woody, shrubby plants, the willows and other ones, these will move in when enough soil in a true bog has gathered and compacted down in the sphagnum moss. Ooh, and now there's a gray catbird sitting on the tree. Hi, friend. And he's sitting at the very edge, and it's almost like he's mocking the sparrow. Hi, guys. Can I come through? Don't want to startle anybody. But bogs will start out with just the sphagnum moss, and then other plants like these grasses and the pitcher plants will move in. And then over time, as more and more matter accumulates, you get the woody things. And as you can see is almost happening now, the woody stuff will overshade a lot of what we think of as the characteristic bog plants. So bogs are an ever-living, ever-evolving thing, and just scratching the surface for this and other programs, they seem absolutely fascinating. For those of you who may have watched our fern live stream, this unusual fern is a royal fern. You can see how the sporangia are growing at the end of the frond, kind of like a crown. So It's a pretty neat one that I came across while making my way out here. All right, baby is gone. Oh, you might be able to see where I started sinking in on my way to scout things out yesterday. And that, again, that sinking in is, we're walking on basically, hi, sorry, don't mean to bother anybody. Not after your baby, I promise. Compacted sphagnum. In fact, here is a great example. I'm not going to go much further in because here on my left, this is sphagnum moss that's kind of building up. And then over here, this brownish mass just sinks in. This is dead sphagnum that isn't decomposing because it's being kept under the water in acidic conditions. And you can sink in really deep in this. There's a reason why I am wearing my Keens and not and good water shoes for sure in a bog. Because the other plant I wanted to point out to you guys is this teeny tiny little thing right here. And it's not just right here, it is all over the place. All of these little upright stems. This is a bog plant that you are familiar with. Kind of in the vein of thinking of the skunk cabbage with what you eat. You know this plant. You have eaten the fruits of this plant. And you may connect it, knowingly or not, to bogs. But we normally think of them as growing high north. It has these little pinkish flowers that have yet to open on this plant. And they will hold, oh, here's another good example. They will be pollinated and produce a fruit that is grown commercially from this plant up north. This teeny tiny little thing is considered a shrub. I'm not quite sure how. This is cranberry, which I was absolutely shocked when I came out looking for cranberry and could not figure out where it was and had to be shown. I just never would have guessed that, but there we are. Your cranberries come from that stalk. And so I just want to give you guys another look at the lake. I'm not going to continue out further because trampling the moss can kill it and really damage the bog ecosystem. But I think it's just an absolutely gorgeous day. Forgive me as I finish working out the finer points of this gizmo. North Campus is a great place to sit and have lunch if you get the chance. But come walk on the boardwalks. Come see the mountain laurels, our water lilies just starting to bloom, and see which of our bog plants you can spot. And there's gonna be more blooming, I am sure. All right, so I'm heading back to our boardwalk now, squishing merrily all the way. But if you have any questions or comments that you thought of while watching this somewhat abbreviated video and tour, please drop them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Botanical Garden remains open dawn to dusk year round. Please just take appropriate precautions. Don't come in groups of more than 20. You should be good. Wear sunscreen if you're like me and you're going to fry at the drop of a hat. And see what about the bog or the many other kinds of habitats that we have featured here that stand out to you. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. Stay up to date on our Facebook and our newsletters for more information about any more highlight tours before the first Monday in July. And take care. Bye.